this day forward, every decision that I make will be my own. I choose to be the best that I can be. I choose to be courageous in everything I do. My past don't dictate who I am. Yeah. I choose to be the best that I can be. I choose to be authentic in everything I do. My past don't dictate who I am. I choose.
Bravo. Bravo. Beautiful. Nicely done. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Top of the morning, everyone. Oh, it's great to see all these beautiful lights out here. We've been really talking about the idea of being the light of the world. What's it mean to be the light of the world? Jesus said, you are the light of the world. So let's just kind of think about how we can experience and be that even more in different areas of our lives. We are, I believe, called to move into a place of expressing more of our unique divine nature. We are created in the image and after the likeness of the divine, and I really think that that's the essence of what Jesus was trying to show us and teach us. Not that necessarily that only he was divine, but he said the things that I do, you shall do also, and even greater things. So we're being called to allow something more than our limited way of thinking and seeing and being to unfold in our lives and in ways that perhaps we haven't experienced before, in ways that we are new to us. Maybe they're adventuresome, maybe they're just part of our everyday moving forward, and they don't necessarily have to be amazing, leaping tall buildings at a single bound kind of things. Really, oftentimes, really expressing more of our divine nature happens in a lot of the small things that we have in life. And so we've been talking about the different spiritual qualities that are inherent in each and every one of us, that Jesus the Christ demonstrated and symbolized for us in so many different ways. And these qualities are available to each and every one of us. We all have them within us, and yet we have them in different varying degrees of development. That we're all here developing these different qualities, and we're developing them whether we know it or not, whether we realize it or not. And oftentimes what we find is the best experiences of growing in those kinds of divine qualities happen when we find ourselves confronted when we're not experiencing or expressing them in some way. We get opportunities to learn. We get our opportunities to grow. There's a story I came across of 4 high school boys, and they were late one morning for class one day, and they entered the classroom and they solemnly told the teacher that they were detained due to a flat tire. And the teacher thought about it for a little bit and said, well, you missed a test, and you're going to fail this test because you missed the test. And they said, well, please, give us another chance, give us an opportunity. Are you willing to let us try and make up this test? And she said, well, she had a little sympathy for him. She says, I'm willing to let you make up the test. So she gave each of them a piece of paper and had each of them go into the 4 corners of the room and say, your question is, which tire was flat? So she was willing, and she also was open to knowing the truth, right? There was a farmer one day who was oppressed by the noonday heat and went out under a walnut tree to get some rest. And as he sat there under the walnut tree, he looked up and he saw out on his fields, he saw pumpkin vines, and he said, God really is kind of foolish and inexperienced. He put a big, heavy pumpkin on a frail little vine that has so little strength it has to be on the ground, and then he puts a small walnut on a tree with a branch that could hold up 2 men. I mean, any man could do better than that. And just then a breeze came along and a walnut fell on his head. There are things going on in life that are a part of our understanding. There are things that are a little perhaps outside of our understanding, and yet in all things there is an essence that is moving and working toward a greater awareness and experience of good. In Unity, that's one of the founding principles that we talk about, that there really is only one presence and one power in the universe, in this place and in my life, God, the absolute good. There's a principle that works through our lives. And Charles Fillmore said the will should never be retarded in its development, but should be strengthened along all lines. The idea of breaking the will of children is wholly erroneous. The perfect human is produced by rounding out the will and joining it to our understanding. And so the idea of giving up the will to God's will should not include the thought of weakening it or causing it to become in any way less. It properly means that the will is being instructed how to act for the highest and best. And I really like that understanding of that definition. You see, each and every one of us has a will, and we use it in ways that really oftentimes reflect our highest and best, and we also use it in ways oftentimes that reflects our lowest and our littlest, don't we? We can. It's a powerful gift that we have. In Job chapter 22, verse 28, it says, "You will decide on a matter, and it will be established for you, and light will shine on your ways." You will decide upon a matter. And Charles Fillmore, also the co-founder of Unity, says, "The will is the executive faculty of the mind and carries out the edicts of the I am." It's the executive faculty of the mind. And one of the primary things in working with our will is to recognize it is our ability to decide, to choose. And Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "The education of the will is the object of our existence." Everything that's going on in our life and world in some way is there to help us refine this use, this awareness, this development of our will. Have you noticed that human willpower is sometimes a bit insufficient to carry us from maybe an idea into fulfillment? You ever kind of run into that kind of challenge? Came across a wonderful story about a man who was really committed to losing some weight and was driving along one day, and he really saw this donut shop that he had loved, and he just, he thought, well, if, God, if it's your will, if for me to have this donut, when I go there, there'll be a parking space right in front. And so as he's driving, he sees, sure enough, he said, I was going by there, and sure enough, after the 7th time around the block, there was a parking space right there. And so it was obviously God's will. And I was reminded when I was growing up of my parents telling a story of some of their friends, some of the neighbor friends who were very devout, traditional, religious in their views. And the wife would talk to the husband, and the husband would say, well, maybe we should do this. And if it's something she didn't want to do, she would just say, George, that's not God's will. That's not God's will. But if it's something she wanted to do, she was like, well, George, it's God's will. It's interesting how we kind of talk about that. But, we have a tendency to think, though, in a way that really paints a picture that God is somehow this being out there that is making different choices and decisions for us in different ways. And I'm going to suggest to you that that's absolutely erroneous. The divine has never made but one decision for you. Only one. Only one decision. Are you asking me to tell you what it is? Yes. Can't you guess? The decision has made The divine has made one decision, and that is the divine. It's made only one decision, and that is to express the divine, to experience the divine, to be the divine. You are created in the image and after the likeness divine, and the only decision the divine has ever made with you, in you, for you, about you, is that you and I, are experiencing and expressing, and we are a part of the divine. There's only one, and we're a part of that. And part of our awakening and understanding is helping us to realign our awareness, our thinking, and our decision-making process in such a way that we are acknowledging and recognizing that in all of the different ways that we live, in these multitude of different ways. Julie and I were having a conversation on the way in this morning, and we were listening to This American Life. And I don't remember all the context of it, but I do recall that one of the things that came out of our conversation is understanding is that the divine really, we come into this world and into this experience in order for the divine to be able to experience itself. And so there's a knowing when you're in the divine, when you're actually completely immersed in the divine, there is a knowing of our unique divine nature. And when we are living in this world, we are in the process of experiencing that, or we are in the process of trying to remove or release those things that might get in the way of that. We're created in the image and after the likeness of Spirit, of the divine. So part of our understanding, our will is for the universal ideal in heaven to permeate the stuff and circumstances of our human existence on earth. In short, Linda Martello-Whitsett, who is our wonderful neighbor down in San Antonio, at Unity in San Antonio, wrote this wonderful book called Divine Audacity. And I'm really getting a lot of insight and awareness about the teachings of Charles Fillmore on the 12 powers that are within each one of us, the 12 divine qualities that are an aspect of the Christ. And each of them are represented by one of the 12 disciples that are also represented by the 12 tribes of Israel. And so we are looking at these as an understanding of different spiritual qualities that exist within each one of us. And so when we have this idea of our will is for the universal ideal, which is these divine ideas, to come into our experiences in life. In short, this interpretation, we affirm that I may bring into this microcosm good inherent in the macrocosm, that I may envision and live out the unifying power of divine love at the heart of all that is. And this happens through the faculty of our will. It really is something that we can choose, or we can choose not to be a part of that. We can choose not to align with that. When we think about this, no condition or circumstance is sent to us by the will of a superior sentient being out there, as Linda says. In other words, God cannot and does not require us to do anything. God is not a doer of anything, because God is not like a person. God is the one mind and power throughout the cosmos. Eternal life, infinite love, ever present, the cosmos is eternal life, infinite love, wisdom, all spiritual power, and therefore your will is the fulfillment of life, of love, of wisdom, and all spiritual power. Ultimately, everything that you will in your life comes back to a desire of some form in some way, doesn't it? It is a desire. Ultimately, there is no will without a desire of some form in some way. And desire is really the universe knocking at the door of our hearts, our minds, our consciousness to experience and to express more of our unique divine nature. So one of the questions that Linda asked is, when and where have you perceived yourself to be at a crossroads between self-serving personal desires and your grander sense of purpose? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Anybody been there? Yeah. Spiritual will is not submitting our personal will to an invisible superhuman being, being told through any other person what I should do or be. It's not subjugating our consciousness or our conscience to a coercive influence, including religion, dogma, or impose any lessons that we've experienced or punishments of any sort. It really is more of an alignment with this unlimited, benevolent consciousness that is at the heart of all creation and is the very act of creation itself. In a synoptic study of teachings of unity on page 21, there's a wonderful lesson. It says, one gets a good idea of the meaning of the will of God when he thinks of it as the ceaseless longing of the Creator to perfect him herself in that which is created. And thus the will of God in humankind and the Christ in man are actually one and the same. Christ is that divine pattern, that divine idea seeking perfect expression in our life. Now, perfect expression doesn't mean uniform expression. That's another important, really, distinction to make. It's not about being uniform, it's about actually being unique, because every expression of that divine nature is unique. And that's one of the things that makes it divine. Your uniqueness is also a part of your divinity. Do you realize that? What makes you you is really the divine expressing through you in so many wonderful ways. In Prosperity, the book Prosperity by Charles Fillmore, he says, they say that it is God's will for us to have some hard times and some good times, feast and famines. This is not logically true when you consider God as principle. If you think of God as a man who arbitrarily gives or withholds by the exercise of his personal will, you might reach such a conclusion. But God is changeless, and if he gives one moment, he continued to give eternally. It is his nature to give. And his nature is eternally the same. And so when you talk of hard times, famine, lack, you are talking of something that has no place in the mind of God. Charles Fillmore from Prosperity. And so ultimately, the will of God is that cosmic urge for self-expression. The will of God individualized in me and in you is rapidly expanding the desire for a higher benevolence, a higher awareness, a higher experience and expression of something even more in alignment with a higher will, a higher good. And so there are three things that Linda Martillo-Wessett, three different aspects, you might say, of will that really, I think, help us to kind of get a grasp on what will ultimately is in us. And the first thing she talks about is that will is ultimately choice. It's the ability to choose. It's the choosing power of will, or our ability to desire one possibility among infinite possibilities and to select it, to pick it. The word choose also comes from a word that means to decide. And the word decide actually, from its original understanding, means to cut or to cut off. When you decide something, it's basically you're cutting something else out. And so the ability to decide is actually, the ability to choose is to pick something and eliminate something. And we are given that gift to be able to pick and to eliminate, to release. So it involves the ability of renunciation or elimination as one of our divine qualities. And so ultimately, it comes into an understanding that whatever we are working with in our lives, we have the power and the ability to choose. But let me kind of clarify something. What we ultimately have the ability and the power to choose is not necessarily what has already been created. What has already been created, we are experiencing out here in the world. what's going on in your life right now, is what has already been created. It already is. And so we're not in a position to choose not creating what already is. We only are in a position to choose what will be created from this point here right now. Now is the moment of power, right? Now is the moment of power. And so you have the possibility and the ability to choose, and the thing that you have the ability to choose is very simple. You have the ability to choose what you're going to hold in your thoughts and feelings and awareness. And so when you're in a circumstance or situation and you're really dealing with challenges out here in the world, our ability to choose is not to change what's going on out here. It's not to change your partner. It's not to change your children. It's not to change your boss. It's not to change, you don't have any power to change any of those. We don't have that power. What we have is the power to change our consciousness in those circumstances and situations with those people. You're hearing what? It really is all an ability to shift and to realign ourselves with something higher that is within us. And in the very act of doing so, you actually are in the process of creating something different, aren't you? You're in the process of creating a new now, a new circumstance, a new experience. Emily Cady, and one of the things that Linda says in her book that I really like, she says, desire is the driver of our choice making. We cannot have what we do not want, not because it is denied to us, but because it is not in our awareness or not in our view. We cannot see or be or have what we do not desire. Desire is our natural, it is natural to our divine identity. Every evolving divine life demands increase and expansion of consciousness. And at the heart of all humanity is a divine discontent that propels us toward more conscious, intentional, spiritual living. And therefore, although it is true that we cannot see or be or have what we do not desire, we have no problem desiring. Because desire is innate. And ultimately, there's some teachings that part of our spiritual work is to eliminate all desire. And yet, if you really contemplate that, that in itself is a desire, isn't it? So Charles Fillmore said, the simple statement, I will to be well, gathers the forces of mind and body about the central idea of wholeness. And the will holds the center just so long as the I am continues its affirmation. But I want to point out that it's also spiritually true that you cannot desire what you do not have. So let me say that again. It is spiritually true that you cannot desire what you do not have. Emily Cady says, desire in the heart is always God tapping at the door of your consciousness with his infinite supply. The thing that you desire has already been started towards you. And it is the first little approach of the thing itself striking you that makes you desire it. So let me say this again. There's two aspects of this I think are very important. One is, you cannot have something in your experience that you don't ultimately desire. It's not possible. And the second thing is, and really catch hold of this because it's a very powerful, valuable, empowering understanding of how we do bring things into our experience, is a recognition that whatever it is that comes into your awareness as a desire is ultimately the divine knocking at the door of your consciousness. That desire already exists in spirit. And it's trying to manifest in and through your experience of it. Now, she goes on to say, that doesn't mean that your desire for your neighbor's wife she says you really cannot ultimately have that desire because it really isn't for, quote, your neighbor's wife or your neighbor's husband or what the neighbor has. What you desire is your own experience of love and connection. What you desire is ultimately your own experience of abundance, of possibilities. So you can't really ultimately desire what another has because that really isn't yours. What is yours is yours. And there is an abundant possibility and supply for that to be fulfilled. And so it really makes no sense that ultimately, in truth, you do not desire something that belongs to someone else. What you desire is your own. And it's an important distinction, I think, and valuable distinction to recognize. So choice, we choose, and we choose from our desires. And then the second piece of this, another aspect of this, is commitment. Will, the development of will is also a development of our commitment. And commitment, out of infinite possibilities, I've chosen one, and I determine that it is mine, and I resolve to follow its calling. So then I commit to it, and commitment places me on a particular path, and commitment leads me not to be random in my actions and wandering in my choice and my decisions. If I decide that I'm going to make a trip to California, and I start heading out toward California, and then I kind of go, well, maybe I'd really rather go to New York. And I start heading back toward New York, and I'm going toward New York, and I go, well, really, I think I'd really rather go to Canada. You're going to be wandering all over the map, but you're not going to make it to California. And you're going to wind up exactly where you have decided you want to be, if you ever decide that you're going to be. You follow what I'm saying? So you do have to make a decision and make a commitment of where you're wanting to go and what you're wanting to experience. And commitment leads not to random action, but to deliberate, intentional action. Choosing and following this one path means I do not choose to follow other paths. And so one of my friends from Unity in Woodinville, a wonderful spiritual guy, used to put on his signature all the time, there are many possible futures. The one that is to be is up to me. So each and every one of us have infinite possible futures, but it's the one that we decide and choose and we hold and we commit to is the one that we're going to draw into our awareness and experience. This or something even better is always a wonderful understanding of that. So when you commit, one of the things I say, when you make a commitment to something, I think it really is valuable to recognize that a big piece of our work is when we make a decision, when we make a commitment, when we say we're going to do something, it's valuable to recognize that if we make a commitment to something and we don't follow through on that commitment, if we agree to do something and we don't follow through on that agreement, there is an automatic diminishment of our power. There's an automatic diminishment of our self-esteem. There's an automatic diminishment of our sense of value and self-worth. Now, it doesn't make us wrong, it doesn't make us bad, but it's really something to be conscious of and aware of. And when I say I'm going to do something, and trust me, I'm guilty, said I'm going to do things and have not followed through on it. And I can assure you, it is just like that you automatically are disempowering yourself. It's just in the very act of saying something and then not following through on it that you actually are limiting you're not empowering your own word. And when I say I'm going to do something and I don't follow through on it, again, it doesn't make me wrong, it doesn't make me bad, it doesn't make you wrong, make you bad, but just be conscious that when I say I'm going to do something, that's why Jesus, I believe, said, let your words be yea, yea, or nay, nay. Yes or no. When you are in the process of trying to make a decision, when you make a decision, let your yes be yes, fully yes, all yes. And if it's really kind of, well, I'm not too sure, then perhaps it needs to be a no until you really do know that it's a yes. Now, that's not to say that you don't follow through on your inner awareness of yes. Listen to the yes. Sometimes we hear a yes on a deeper level, and the little monkey mind's going, you know that one? But if you say yes to something higher, you can bet that there's something more for you, and you'll have an opportunity to see what that is, even though you can't see it clearly in that moment. I think this is what Jesus also was talking about when he said, keep your eyes single. Stay focused on what it is that you want to experience in life, and turn away from those things that you really don't want to experience. When all the other stuff starts popping up, you know, there's a saying that obstacles are what you see when you take your eyes off of the goal. So when you take your eyes off of what it is that you're really wanting to manifest and create, and you start wandering to all the possibilities of the what I call the yeah buts, that's what that kind of keeps us stuck. And so commitment is a big part of using our will, learning to use our will to make a decision, to make a choice, and then to be able to stay with that, to hold to it, and to hold to what it is that we are wanting to pull into our experience. And then the third aspect of this that Linda Martillett-Whitsett discusses is willingness. You know, willingness is probably the highest expression of our will. She points out that there's an other side of will, and we all use it at times, and there are times in this world that I suppose it's probably necessary. I don't know that we can really function without having some sense of willfulness. But the reality is that most of our challenges and difficulties and problems in this world, if you really think about it, all kind of come back to willfulness. Someone is trying to impose their will on something or someone else in some way. And I would bet that almost every problem that you can think of in your life or in this world, in some ways, come back to a willfulness. You might say it's the ego consciousness. And, you know, we all have egos. We're not our egos, but we have them. And they oftentimes are running the show, aren't they? And so part of our waking up is to recognize that the ability to step out of an energy of willfulness and being open to a willingness for something higher within us, our higher self, the spirit within us, to act in and through us, to work for us, to allow us, to bless us for that matter. Interestingly enough, I had a wonderful opportunity to study a healing work by Frederick Keeler. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with Frederick Keeler, but amazing healer back in the 50s and 60s. And I read a great book by him that the title of it's not coming to me right now, but I think it was actually Christian Healing. Charles Fillmore wrote one that name also, but one of the things I got in Frederick Keeler's teachings about how he did healing work. He just healed some people were experiencing amazing healings physically in all kinds of ways in their lives. And what he pointed out very simply was, when I am, quote, treating for someone, what I am actually doing is I am choosing health for them. I'm simply making a choice. I'm choosing health for them. It's my choice that they be healthy, my decision, my desire. And so I'm making that choice for them even when they're not in a place where they can make that choice for themselves. I'm not forcing them to make that choice. I'm making it available to them. But I'm making sure that in me, that's the choice I have for them. That's the decision that I'm making for them. Think about this in terms of the people in your life and the power that you have to choose the good for them, to choose prosperity for them, to choose prosperity and choose healing and health for them, to choose life for them, to see them in that light of being healthy, of being whole, of being loved, of being loving, of being wise, of being aware, having a knowing that they have within them those divine qualities. And our work in this life is to really hold that consciousness, not only for them, but for ourselves. It's sometimes challenging because our human mind jumps in there and has all kinds of decisions that it makes that don't align with the essence of that other person or with ourselves for that matter. And so part of our shifting is moving into an awareness that we have an ability to allow something greater and more to move into our lives and into our world. And allowing is a great power. What are you allowing in your awareness? What are you allowing in your focus? What are you allowing in your commitments in life? What are you allowing to be the center of your energy and creative power? Well, that's our homework for this week and probably for this life, and maybe a few others, who knows. But I invite you to really take some time to reflect on and meditate on the idea of will, of making choice, of holding to the choices for the highest, and to allowing something greater to unfold in all aspects of life. Let's prepare for our meditation time. So let's move into a comfortable place, a place of openness, of peace, of stillness. And just allow your awareness to focus into your breath. Allow the breathing to flow in and out. It's not necessarily to change it, regulate it, or control it. Just allow it. And in your awareness, focus on the brain's frontal lobe. And there lies an energy vortex of the power of spiritual will. And just let these words be your words. I concentrate my attention on this area, this executive functioning, and I choose my ability to focus verbally and visually, to remember and make connections between ideas, and to make a choice. And I shine the white light of will throughout the front of my brain and across my forehead and up the crown of my head. I clear my busy brain of preconceived notions and all false imagings. Centered in spiritual will, I affirm my capacity to choose. And guided by my companion powers of understanding and wisdom, imagination, I draw from the infinite possibilities one divine idea. And this one divine idea catches hold of me. And it appears as a powerful desire. It becomes rooted in my awareness as mine. And I affirm my capacity to commit to a path ahead. And I will be a blessing and blessed. I will live as the light of the world. I will, and just fill in your commitment. And I set upon a course of action that supports my choice. I will live in integrity, honoring my commitment and holding myself accountable to do what I say I will do. affirm my willingness. I am willing. I'm willing to remain attuned to the source of all good, and I choose it. I'm willing to allow life to unfold, and I acquiesce to the truth. I cooperate with the impulse of divine identity in me. I'm willing to be centered and unruffled. As time passes and light shines on my path ahead, I always return to that center. I'm willing to courageously decide what I will do and be. And I'm willing to stretch beyond perceived limits. I'm willing to walk with confidence into my future. I'm willing to risk being vulnerable to love. And I'm willing to listen without being threatened. I'm willing to experience the joy of living today, and I choose it. I'm willing to be purposeful and to know I am divine. And divine will is my spiritual name and nature. I allow it. I accept it. I choose it. I follow it. I am the light of the world. And wherever I am and whatever the circumstances, I choose light. Take now a nice deep breath. Breathing into the heart space. Take another nice deep breath and just be willing to let the heart expand and be open. And take one more nice deep breath. Let your awareness be in this room, time and place, in the consciousness and the energy of allowing the divine to express in and through you, as you. And so it is.